What's up YouTube? Today I'm going to run you through how I made this ink bleed effect that I posted on my Instagram recently. I'm going to take you through a couple of options so that you can get it just how you want it. Okay, first step as always is create a canvas and put your text out. I'm not going to waste time with this, so I've got it already here. So let me walk you through the first effect that I made, which is the one I've released on my reel. There's a few things I'm going to show through. So the first one is combining the text and the background layer. So once I've done this, just convert it to a smart object. Come up to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. I'm going to use fill blur here because it's going to give me a little bit more to work with. So this is good because you can select points, and with these points you can set them to different blur values like this. So let's say set this to about 150 or just something around that, and then if I select another point here on the text and turn it down, you see how it just blurs out the gap between. So there's a lot to work with here. There's a lot more variety of what you can create. So I'm just going to create different blurred areas just inconsistently, because that normally works better with bleed effects. Okay, here we go. So now selecting my points, I'm just going to confirm that with enter. Now already you can see like the inconsistency is what really builds it. If you just have a set blur, it's not as good. So let me now come down to this bit, which is the next step. We're going to add a threshold layer. Make sure that you selected the little threshold icon here rather than the mask, otherwise it won't do anything. So now once you've got this selected, you can already see, let's say the R here is really cool. It's making it like kind of textured and grungy. So if you adjust this level, it hides and reveals the dark areas. So you can select this however you want. So I'm going to come to maybe about here, and I'm also going to go back, and because it's a smart object you can add on more blurs. I'm just going to add a Gaussian overall, just so it's, you know, blurred the whole way through. It gives me a bit more effect. And then come back and adjust the threshold layer. Okay, yeah, cool. So now once you've adjusted this, you see already, you can see it starting to build, like seeing these little areas here that are attaching the letters. Same thing here. It already looks like the ink is leaking out the edges, which is ideal. So I'm also going to come up to filter, distort, and ripple, just to add to this effect. So now I'm going to put it on maybe 60-ish. You can see there, it creates these jagged edges, and I might even turn it down a little bit just so it's a little bit more subtle. So again, amazing the fact that it's a smart object. You can change it whenever you like. There we go, and you can already see it's coming together now. Okay, so now that I've confirmed this, all of these effect levels and everything, what I'm going to do, select them both, duplicate it, and then convert that into a smart object. So this basically means that I've got these two layers here just as spares in case I've ruined this, so that I can go back. So I'm just going to put them in a folder and hide that. So what I'm going to do now is go up to filter and filter gallery. So what I'm going to try and do is get this textured effect on the background to look a bit more like paper. Okay, so how I go about this is I come down to texture and I select on texturizer here. Make sure that on this effect panel here you want the eye to be selected on texturizer so that it's going to show the effect. These figures are, you can just play around with them to adjust it to how you like. It's all personal preference. But if I just zoom in here on the preview just to get an idea, you can see subtly the like paper texture looks quite grainy. I'm going to make it just quite faint, as I'm going to add some more texture on top. 7, turn this down to about 60. So now you can see this looks a bit more textured now as sort of a start. And now the second step I'm going to do after this is add in my own texture files. Scale that up and come over to layer modes where it says normal, come down, usually select screen. Screen's normally a good start, but with these kind of effects, just cycle through them, see what looks good for you. I'm going to go on screen for the start, maybe turn it down to about 50, and you can see it starting to show through now. But you also want the effect to cover the light areas, not just the dark areas. So I'm going to duplicate it, come over to the layer mode again and go down to exclusion, and you can see it makes the background very grey. So you can keep it like this if you prefer this, but I'm going to turn the exclusion layer down a lot more, which is what I commonly do, maybe to around less than half of the opacity in this one. So I'm going to go for 20 on this. And now you can see it's coming together quite well. I've just got one more thing I'm going to add. So what I will do is just on this layer on the actual background and text file, just going to add another Gaussian blur. And this will just blur the edges such a subtle amount that it will look a bit more spread. So I'm going to select it maybe about 1.5 pixels, and that is this ink bleed finished. So you can see it's like a lot of playing around and testing. So it's a lot of these values here. So if we go back into this initial folder, these first effects that you place on them, there's so many different distortion effects that you can place on to just play around with, and you can create just about anything really. You've got all of these to select through and play with that can texture it, create jagged edges, you know, get exactly what you want for an ink bleed effect. So just spend a lot of time playing around with them and then balancing the threshold layer as well, and you can get just about anything that you want. But like, I love what it's done with the R here, how it's connected the letters, and you can see just how easy it is to get through. It's really useful. Okay, so now I'm just going to walk you through the second option for the effect. This one is, arguably a little bit easier and could be a little bit better, but it depends what you want. This is a really strong effect, but I think this one can add a little bit more detail on the edges. So I've repeated the same step. You combine the text and the background into a smart object, come up to filter, and I'm going to add a fill blur again. Okay, so yeah, so you just want to add blur points in consistently. You want some areas to be a bit more blurred than others. There you go. So now when you're happy with the blur points, just press enter to confirm it and come up to filter gallery, just here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just remove the current ones I've got. So I've got this texturizer on for the last effect. I'm going to keep this on here because I like this. So I'm just going to keep this effect. So I'm going to press the plus to add one on top. Come over to sketch, torn edges. Now this is going to be the effect that is going to produce a very cool visual. So let me just turn the image balance down. These are the settings you want to play with. There's a lot of options here. You can go for a lot more of a thick, bold, like heavy bleed to the point where it's almost unreadable, because some people, you know, you can work with that effect. Or you can go with the opposite, bring it down to the point where it's almost completely faded off the page. You know, there's a lot of options with it. So let me come to like a fine middle ground, maybe about 30. And then you've got the smoothness bar here, which is going to affect the edges. It's going to affect the edges the most in the effect. So if I bring it right down to like 2, you can see here the edges become very dotted, almost like dissolved. So I'm going to drag that up just to create a bit more, you know, consistency through the edges whilst they still retain the texture. So I'm going to come to maybe 9, and then the contrast. Again, play around with this bar. Let's say 16. And I'm just going to confirm this here. Okay, right, the texturizer hasn't come on. So if I go back onto filter gallery here, I'm just going to drag it above just to make sure that that is applied. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so now, yeah, you can see this is, you know, a very similar ink bleed effect if we compare it to the other one. You know, this one seems a lot less rough around the edges. It seems like it retains its form better than this one. So you can see here the edges, you can see how jaggedy it is. This is all down to preference again. Some people prefer this, some people prefer the first one. But I'm just going to repeat the same, you know, finishing touches with the texture layers. So I'm just going to paste them over from the original. I'm going to add noise here as well. You can add noise with a color fill layer, but I like to do Command Option Shift E, and it duplicates and combines every layer that's currently visible. Then you can come up to filter, noise, add noise. I'm going to add it maybe about 7. And here you go. That is the finished ink bleed effect. There's 2 methods of how to create it. So I hope this can be useful to you, you know, whether you're designing for the first time or you're experienced already. It's something I use a lot in my work. It's really useful for me. So thanks for watching this video, and I will see you again soon for another tutorial.